Hello and welcome back to another episode. If you want to do what a little different for you today, we've got Dr. Adam Symington on, and he's data scientist. Now, some of you may remember Adam's episode previously. Adam's actually been doing a load of interviewing for different data science positions where he works. So we thought we'd jump on and Adam would give us some sort of tips and advice and things he's found whilst he's doing these interviews, why people have succeeded, why people maybe haven't succeeded in the process. Hi, Adam.
Hello, nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to have you on the show, mate. We were just having a quick chat, catch up. I think this is going to be really interesting for people that want to get into data science because you've been plugging away and interviewing loads of people where you work, right?
Yeah, that's right. Geolect has hired, or has been hiring a lot over the past year, and I think Geolect's quite a fun place to work. We've got quite like an interesting problem set that we try and solve, and hence we get a lot of candidates applying. Sometimes just directly to adverts, sometimes just cold applications, and hence, yeah, I've spent in my role now that I'm one of the leaders in the company. I have to spend a lot of time sifting through these CVs and interviewing good, well, people who on paper look quite good, and
Mm.
trying to make those hiring decisions.
Okay.
And off the back of that, I've come up with do's and don'ts, shall we say, for how to get through the data science interview process, which I thought would be interesting to have a chat about.
100%. I mean, let's, for everybody listening, if they didn't hear your episode previously, let's have a really quick overview of what a data scientist actually is.
Data scientist is somebody who takes some sort of data and I guess just gains insight from it or draws insight from that data. This can be, I guess, the sort of the most popular examples of this would be around in the area of machine learning and AI. So taking some data and using that data to make a prediction. So predict whether it could be location data and predicting, an optimal route to take. It could be taking, it could be a recommender algorithm. So like Netflix, for example, will recommend things to you based upon what you have watched in the past, things like that. Or it could be more on the data analysis side of things. So taking your huge, volumes of data and pulling out those like interesting little nuggets of information. So it's just anything really to do with data and taking that data and finding something useful for a customer in that data.
Okay, interesting. So a lot of problem solving going on, a lot of sort of, I'd imagine, a lot of maths involved in this.
Lots of programming, a
Hmm.
little bit of well, I was going to say a little bit of maths, a lot of maths actually
Hmm.
is involved. And problem solving is key. I think one of the crucial things really is around the problem solving piece is being able to break a problem down. So you may come across a problem that is so at work at the moment, for example, we're trying to I got to be careful what I say actually. One
Hmm.
example, we're taking AIS data, which is the data that you have that ships broadcast as they broadcast their positions, they move around the world.
Hmm.
Um, we look for interesting anomalies within that data. So some of these data points may be spoofed. So someone may have hacked the GPS to make it seem as if the ship is in another area in the world than
Ah,
where it actually
okay.
is. So, for example, you could imagine, illegal smuggling. This would happen quite a lot. A vessel could be pretending that it's at anchor in Dubai or somewhere in the Persian Gulf, and actually it is gone off to pick up some illegal cargo, maybe oil from Iran, things like that.
Wow.
So taking this sort of data and trying to find the anomalous points, the fake points within that, when you really break that problem down, it is basically anomaly detection within time series data. So trying to find data points in a time series data set that are fake or unusual. Then another problem that we're trying to solve is we've taken sonar data and we're trying to find anomalous sound, like sound clips within a larger sample.
Right.
Again, when you break this down, it is just anomaly detection within time series data. So you've got two very, very different problems, but when you break them down, it is a very similar methodology to solve that problem. And I think that's a really key thing in data science is being able to cut through all that noise and find the correct tool for the problem. And what you then tend to find is that there's actually quite a small number of problem solving methods that can be used to apply to huge array of different problems.
Wow. I mean, I think, last time you were on, I said I'm absolutely fascinated by what you guys can do with data. And it does blow my mind, the kind of things you can pull from these data sets. It is incredible. But for me, it sounds like, and you could tell me I'm wrong, it sounds like this is a job or a career that would require somebody to go to university and study some sort of, is there a sort of data science degree, or is it a mathematics degree they need, or some sort of scientific degree? Do you need something like that to get into this? Or can you, I guess you can't be a school leader really, can you?
Realistically, yes, I would say. So this is maybe sort of leading on to the broader discussion point. But one of the problems I think at the moment in data science is that there are a lot of boot camps and online courses designed. So it was an article published back, I think, in around 2010, maybe 2012, that described data science as the sexiest profession of the 21st century. And
Oh.
off the back of that, you've got a lot of it's one of these posts, these blog posts or whatever that went viral.
Mm.
And off the back of that, it became quite a buzzword hot topic. And now, off the back of that, lots of people are trying to get into data science, and there's quite a lot of, quick fix,
Sure.
boot camp courses that exist online. So what you tend to find, particularly in the hiring process, is there's lots of people who've not necessarily, if some have gone to university, some haven't, but they've gone online, they've done one of these boot camp courses, and then want to get straight into data science. My personal philosophy is that these aren't good enough. You need a little bit more of a numerical background. Going to university is certainly one way of achieving that. So I did a chemistry degree and then a sort of chemistry and physics PhD. So a very, very highly numerical STEM subject,
Mm-hmm.
which sort of led into this. The other data scientists at GeoLet, two of them have PhDs. One guy worked in this area in the Royal Navy for years.
Oh, wow.
Another two graduates have started. One did a master's in data science. The other ones did a master in computer science. So I think, yes, if we're being realistic, I think some sort of, I think you probably do need that university degree. I don't think these online courses that pop up really cut the mustard.
Okay, yeah, I know that that's what I'd expect, to be honest with you, when we talk about data science. I wouldn't expect you to be able to leave school and go straight into it and do a course online, to be honest with you, from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah.
But that leads us nicely on to, I think I'm right in saying this. Now, people with PhDs and even masters, even with those qualifications, it's incredibly difficult to get in the door somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think this sort of oh, sorry, you were going to speak.
No, no, no. Yeah, yeah. Carry on, please.
So I think yes. So I've interviewed candidates who've got PhDs and candidates who haven't. I think having a PhD, it will certainly open doors for you, but it will not propel you through those doors. Uh, I'm not going to use any specific examples, but I've interviewed some people who, on paper, sure, they've got all of the qualifications in the world. They have, published papers. They have written software. They've got that strong mathematical background that we would require and expect.
Mm-hmm.
However, when it comes to just little things around first impressions, how they communicate, how they sell themselves, how they hold themselves in an interview, they're just it's just not good enough. I think there's a lot more that you need to be able to actually get a job in data science than just having one of these degrees.
I mean, yeah, I'm going to find this really interesting. I can already tell. Let's go a bit deeper on this. So you've got a couple of candidates, both have got PhDs, both in the subjects you're requiring. What makes one better than the other? What do you look at and go, right, I really want this person on the team?
So for me, it usually comes down to, this is sort of getting into broader interview discussion, I guess. Like for me, the candidate that manages to turn the interview around so that they're interviewing me about the company is usually the one that I tend to want to hire. I don't know if that's some sort of weird reverse psychology thing, but so basically it comes down to, well presented and asks lots of engaging and insightful questions. So when I say insightful questions, I mean they're asking questions that I have to actually think about and be like, oh well, yeah, do we do that, or how do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
It sort of betrays it betrays their understanding of the area that they're going into. It
Mm-hmm.
makes them seem engaged. It makes them seem like they've done their research beforehand and they've genuinely come in with they're interviewing us about whether they want to take the job. I think it's an interesting psychological trick, and that's certainly one point. As far as other things are concerned, I think good first impressions are really key. So in today's age, like we have pretty much every interview really is going to be taking place on Zoom or Teams or whatever. So this is going to sound very petty, but just little things around that first impression. So yes, wear, like if you're male, wear a shirt. If you're a girl, just wear a blouse or whatever. Just something to say that you care about this interview. You're prepared to put in a little bit of effort. As far as where your camera is set, sit somewhere where there's good lighting. Blow your background, and make sure your camera's on. Just general little first impressions. Those little things I think go an awful long way into really selling you.
I guess it just shows people have taken some thought into what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So what have you actually found then over this past year? How have you found the whole process of doing these interviews and finding these data scientists? What is something you think industry wide people aren't doing enough to get in the front door?
I think there's 2 points. So I think you can separate that question out into graduates versus non-graduates. So people who are going for entry level positions versus people who've got experience already and are looking to switch into a more senior position. As far as graduates are concerned, I think the ones that stand up, it's like at the end of the day, we all know, like whenever a graduate goes into an interview, we all know that they don't know that much, like they aren't that experienced, they don't know all of the various intricacies of industry. They don't know what they don't know. So with that in mind, we're not expecting them to have amazing software development skills, data science skills, know all of the ins and outs of AWS or various cloud computing platforms, because that's not really taught in universities. But I think the main thing to really sell in those sort of interviews is your enthusiasm and your willingness to learn. I think that goes a really, really long way. So, if we were, for example, I remember one example. In fact, we hired this person. I think I mentioned, have you come across Terraform? Terraform is a sort of a software language, sort of a like scripting language, to configure AWS resources programmatically. So I asked, had she any experience with this? And she said, no, she hadn't. But then she asked me, how do you spell that? And made a note of it. I think that goes a really long way to sort of sell their enthusiasm to learn and willingness to learn, which is a really good thing. I think another point, well, this is a broader point, so I'll maybe come back to it. As far as non-graduates are concerned, I think the main thing there is calmness and confidence in your experience goes a long way. So at the end, similar to the point about graduates, actually, data science is a huge spectrum of skill sets and problems. You could work in fintech, work in a bank. It's one of these financial services companies, and your job is to spot frauds or to design certain algorithms. That's one problem set. You could do what we do at Geolect and be applying data science algorithms to, finding illegal shipping or illicit shipping. You could work in a supermarket and try to, optimize supply chains and things like that. There's loads of different problem sets that are involved in this. And so if you come in from a different area, we don't expect you to know everything. In my case, we don't expect you to know everything about shipping. We don't expect you to know everything about satellite imagery. All we're interested in is, are you a problem solver? Like if we were to throw you in at the deep end, would you be able to pick it up and figure out what's going on quite quickly? I think that's really key. So just having confidence in your ability and confidence in your experience so far, and being able to get that across, and just hammer home this idea that, yeah, look, I haven't looked at this before, but if here's how I would go about solving the problem. That sort of calmness and confidence is really, really rare and goes an awful long way, because nobody's got experience of everything. Data science is just such a big subject. And then the third point is around personal projects and personal portfolios.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because I was just about to ask you about personal branding, because we have been banging on about this on the podcast for the last 100 episodes at least, and using LinkedIn, using everything available to you to create some sort of portfolio where you can show some genuine interest in said subject.
Absolutely, yeah. So for example, again, like another person, again, we hired, made an offer to recently, sent the CV in, and as part of it, was a PDF CV, so there were links embedded within it. Clicked on a link and it took me to their GitHub page, and then also took me to their personal website. Like they're a university graduate, so it's putting little personal university projects onto GitHub. The website itself was just, it's still quite a basic app, but it's still the fact that you've gone above and beyond and done this. I think really, I think it goes a huge, a really, really long way. It also gives us a chance to, on the GitHub, for example, to actually go in and click around and look at your code.
Yeah.
Um, it will encourage you as well, I think, to sort of take a little bit of pride in this and make sure it all works, it all looks nice, which is just good for open source community in general.
Hmm.
That's maybe a bit of a side point. Um, and then as far as social media is concerned, I think LinkedIn's quite a big one. We usually will go and have a look at someone's LinkedIn profile before, alongside their CV, and before maybe going for an interview. So just, you know, I guess I don't really know what I would expect to see there,
Hmm.
but just an interest in, I guess, an interest in the subject,
Hmm.
what posts are you making, who are you following, that sort of thing is really
Hmm.
key. But
Definitely.
certainly I think that probably applies to software development and anything techy in general, like
Yeah.
having some sort of project online. And because GitHub is a good example because it shows one that you can program and we can see the evidence of that. But Git and GitHub are they're pretty widely used industry tools. So you're already showing that you know how something that's used in industry works, which is really important. And you'd be surprised how many people don't know how that works.
Sure. I think we may have covered this when you first came on, but it's a point I'd like to raise again. And it's to deal with, so you're doing this data science and you're mining and you're finding all of these points and you're pulling them out of the data. But then being able to convey that to the other people in the business that then need to be able to maybe sell that data or explain that data. You have to be able to do that, don't you? You have to be able to communicate with other people in the business that maybe do not do the data science, and being able to clearly communicate is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably the most important one of the most important points in your career. So to maybe go back to that example that I used earlier about all of these boot camps that have sprung up online, they're teaching you the algorithms, but there is just so much more to it than the algorithms. Yeah, there's you're never going to get a perfect problem that you would get in a boot camp in industry. So there's the problem solving around that, but there's just the communication aspect around it. So like in an average day, I will have to sit and chat to somebody from somebody from the sales team, for example. So a particular customer wants a certain feature, or they want a certain thing to be built. Can you sit down and have a conversation with them and actually get out of them what it is specifically that's needed, and also then be able to convey back the technical details around that. That's going from two people with very, very different backgrounds having a conversation about something quite technical. So I think communication is key. But then also, you could sink a significant chunk of time into designing a model, building a piece of software, whatever it may be, and then you have to be able to present that to somebody again who has no idea and actually in reality probably doesn't care about your model. You have to be able to present to them what the results are, and then I guess the key thing is trust. They have to then trust what you're saying is accurate, so that they're going to go and make a decision based upon that information. And to go back to the interview point, that's something. This maybe going back to the first impressions in general, being able to just be set a good first impression, make people feel at ease around you. It's just a useful skill in life generally, but very, very true in data science as well. And I think as well, just being able to, in an interview, just being able to sit and hold a conversation, ask questions back, be engaging. If you have a question and you don't quite understand the answer, just be happy to say, actually, I don't understand. Can you rephrase that? Or I didn't quite understand this bit. Can you re-explain that? Little things like that are really, really important. And again, quite not something that I see very often whenever I interview data scientists.
See, this is really interesting. Am I right in saying that the best data scientist in the world, fantastic at coding, they can pull anything out of any data set, but they cannot communicate? You would rather hire someone that you can teach the coding to and you can teach how to pull the data to, but can clearly communicate that to the team, right? You'd rather them than the best analytical person in the room. Is that right?
That's a difficult question, I think. So on the one hand, so I think in smaller companies, yes, that's definitely going to be the case because you know in larger companies, a lot of data scientists will sit as cogs in machines. They'll have a specific task that they work on, and they only work on that thing. And then you've got people around them who do a lot of the communications. So they'll go and interact with sales. They'll go and interact with stakeholders, and all you really have to do is be able to communicate to your manager. And I think in that case, it's probably the communication skills are less important than just the outright data science skills. And again, to maybe go a step further, like some of the really big, there are some data scientists out there who are genuine wizards. They just see the world in a completely different light. And these are the people that go and work at DeepMind and develop models, or models is maybe a little bit of an undersell, but develop AI to play chess or play Go and beat world champions. I think in that case, just the raw data science is all that matters, really. When you go down to the smaller companies, so that's when communication really becomes key. Because the reality in data science actually is that very few companies do proper hardcore data science. A lot of it is, simple is the wrong word, but a lot of it is, I think, a little bit smaller scale than perhaps the marketing teams would admit to. And so,
yes.
and so in those, I think in those cases, I think the communication skills are really important. I would never say that I would take a good communicator over someone with a lot of data science skills, but I think communication is definitely the cherry on top. You've got to have a bit of both, I think, in smaller companies.
No, that's a great point. Very good point. So I've come along, I'm, a data scientist, I've got my PhD. What kind of things can I expect in the interview? Are you going to be asking people to do tasks? I know this is going to vary across the industry, by the way, so I'm not asking you what you necessarily do at your company, but what kind of things can you expect in the interview? Am I going to be doing tasks, or what? How's it work?
So generally speaking, it'll be a sort of a standard interview format, I would imagine, in most companies. Like there'll be an initial period, just meet and greet, get to know each other. We'll give a sort of a brief background on the company, sort of sell all the cool stuff that Geolect does, and talk about the company sort of a little bit more broadly. And then we'd like the candidate to then talk to us about what their experience is and what they've done in the past, which bits they like, which bits they don't like, what they're looking to get out of their next role, and those sort of quite broad questions, and maybe a little bit around sort of basics of communication questions. What sort of company they want to work for, company culture, what company culture do you want to work in, how do you like to be, what environments do you like to work in, all of that sort of stuff, just to sort of get a rough idea about them as a person. Because at the end of the day, like we do want to hire a person, not a robot or a cog. You want to get a sense for their personality, so you can sort of see, well, actually, on the one hand, would they want to work for us? Because some personalities just won't work in certain environments, I think. It might be slightly controversial to say, but it's definitely true, and it's true in this industry.
No, you need to say it because it is so true. When you're working in a company, especially like a small to medium sized company, personalities, as much as people kind of want to avoid the question, it does matter because you have to work with these people more than you see your family. It's crucial to your business running well, I think.
And I think as well, it's worth pointing out that it works both ways, because you don't want to go into a job that you don't like the environment, you don't like the people that you work with, because you're going to end up moving on. Eventually you'll want to move on.
Yeah.
So I think it works both ways, and it's important to say that.
Mm.
So those are personality questions and just general experience questions are things that we'd like to open up with. The interview then will generally take sort of a more technical tone. So depending on the role that we're hiring for, and indeed the projects within that role that we've sort of got in mind, we will ask some, generically we'll ask some sort of generic data science questions. Little things like, what is the difference between overfitting and underfitting? Can you explain bias or model bias? Present them with a small problem and say, okay, so how would you go about solving this? And that in the latter question, how do you go about solving this problem? I don't really care. I mean, I do a little bit, but I don't really care about the answer that they give because it's a problem they've probably never encountered before. I more care about them talking through sort of step by step so I can get to understand their thought process and how they approach problems, because I think that's really telling in how they will operate as a data scientist. Um, and then I think after that, yeah, depending on the project and the role that we sort of hiring for, that's when we'll maybe go into the more specific questions. So, for example, if it's a satellite imagery problem, I'll be quite interested in if they've got any experience or thoughts around neural networks would be a good example, object detection using neural networks, these sort of things. Whereas if it's more of a, I don't know, if it's more focused on the sort of the maritime AIS side of things, I'll be more focused on time series questions and things like that. So that's when the interviews get a little bit more technical. And I think the important thing really to stress is, as long as you've got a good grasp of the subject generally, those initial questions are overfitting, underfitting, you'll be able to bat them out of the way pretty easily. And then after that, it's more around just being calm and talking through the problem. So I guess that's another point that I actually made a note of this to mention. I think one of the things that people don't do in interviews, and it's really important to do, is to just say, if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know. Say, look, I don't know the answer to that, but here is how I would go about finding out the answer to that and then solving the problem. I think that's really key. Because tech is, again, I've said it already, like tech is huge. We don't expect you to know everything. It's more about, do we have confidence in your problem solving abilities to be able to let you loose on a problem and you go away and solve it. And then I think to sort of round that point off, then the interview will sort of wrap up. We'd like to give the candidates a chance to ask us questions, and yeah, just going to let them go into as much detail as they want.
And I think from an earlier point you made, that is actually where, as a candidate, you can make quite a big impact, isn't it? Where you start flipping the interview on the interviewer, or interview, however you want to say it, and start actually asking, okay, but how do you do this? Oh, okay, use that system. Oh, have you ever looked at this system? Or however you want to do it. Just ask those engaging questions where you go, oh, hang on, this person actually has really thought about this.
Exactly. And I think as well, like, the technical questions are really good to ask, but also this would probably come from a more experienced candidate from industry, but asking questions around the business generally, so how would you describe yourself? Are you a consultancy company or are you a SaaS company? Little things like that portray that they actually understand business as well as the data science, which is really rare and really, really cool to see. For example, like we came out of a conversation with, again, this person got an offer was made to this person, myself and another data scientist interviewed her, and we came out of the interview on the other side and we stayed on the call and we both just started laughing and said, yeah, we got an absolute grilling there. So the last 20 minutes of the interview was us we were being interviewed.
Yeah.
But yeah, that reverse psychology point, we were like, yeah, this person is really good and we'd like to work with them.
I'm loving this. I think there's so much value here for anyone that wants to be a data scientist. Honestly, take these little tips, and it's a lot of these tips as well haven't necessarily been about your knowledge on the subject. It's just how you conduct yourself, what you say, and the questions you ask. To me, is the biggest takeaway from this chat we've had so far is just put a bit of effort into first impressions, which is always crucial. And I think you always hear it, but it's good to hear it reiterated, and especially from someone that's done a load of interviews in this space. Ask questions not only about the technical, but around the business, and show a genuine interest for working at that business, just not necessarily just in data science in general. And then, have you got any absolute do nots? Because I think you said you've got do's and do nots. Have you got anything where you're like, oh God, please don't do that in an interview?
So there are a lot actually. So one of the questions that we'll usually ask is, so have you looked into this? Have you looked into GeoLeg? Tell us a little bit about some of the research you've done about GeoLeg. I think everyone you need to do some research in the company you're applying to go to.
Hope so.
I think one person, in fact, a few people actually have said, No, I've not done any research. I don't really know what you guys do. Can you explain it? And I'm like, well, you clearly don't really want this job, do you?
Yeah.
That's a massive no. I
Right.
think as well, so read. I think another point would be read the room. If you've made a couple of jokes and they haven't really landed, maybe stop making those jokes.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
Uh,
one.
it's quite a key one. And again, that has happened a few times. And generally, just sort of enthusiasm. Smile. Like I think again, it sort of comes back to these sort of points that are maybe a little bit controversial because I think in the ideal world, and this is probably how this is how the civil service does it. For example, it's all sort of points based and score based. So that the perfect, so that on paper the perfect candidate will make it through. I think the reality. So I've been interviewed a lot, and I've done lots of interviews, and I think that in reality, in most businesses, a lot of it comes down to just the interviewer's gut feeling about someone, and I think
Yeah.
that's where you have to, I think you have to just be, your positivity goes a long way. Just be positive about the interview. Just be engaging. Don't be. I think again, like another thing is being nervous is a problem, and the thing is you can always tell when someone's nervous versus when someone doesn't really want to be there. So I don't think that that's necessarily an issue. But I would say like the main thing for me is just try not to be negative, be as positive as possible.
Mm.
Um, can't think of any more off the top of my head. Those are the
No, no,
main
no.
ones.
That's perfect. I think that's a good overview of don't crack terrible jokes in the interview anyway. Is there anything else you would like to cover, Adam, and maybe any other tips, or do you feel like that's your your experience of interviewing over the last year?
Actually, I've just thought of another one. Don't insult the people that are interviewing you, or the founders of the company.
Oh,
That has
have
happened
you had
before.
that?
Yeah, that's genuinely happened before.
That is,
I'll not
oh my
I will
God.
not give the specific example because it
No.
will. I'll not give the specific example, but that has genuinely happened before,
Wow.
which was quite bad. Um, I mean, actually, to be honest, the more I think about it, there's loads that pop up.
Yeah.
Uh, sell sell your ability is a key thing. So
Okay.
again, somebody I interviewed not too long ago. I asked they were coming out of their PhD, and I asked them about software development during their PhD. So I know a lot of people who've done PhDs and they've published software alongside it. So open source software journals and things like this. Um, so I asked them, right, you said you've written a lot of software. Could you maybe explain, what sort of state that software's in? Have you used Gits, tests, all that sort of lovely stuff? And this person then responded with, "Well, you know what it's like in academia. Sometimes the software can be a little bit iffy." And I was like, "Okay, so are you telling me that the software that you write, and if you came to work at GeoLab would write, is going to be iffy?" You know,
What?
so just little things like that. Think about what you're saying before you
Yeah.
say it, and think about how you're trying to sell things. Because you want to give your interviewer a warm, fuzzy feeling that if this person comes into the company, they are going to do a great job from day one, and you don't need to worry about them. I think worry is a very key thing, because again, in data science, like all of these processes, all of these pieces of software, codes, methods, whatever you may call it, they're all sitting on a cloud somewhere running. Um, if anything was to happen, if dodgy code manages to make it into a production environment, things can go down for the customer, which just ends up destroying things. And anyone who works in software will know of examples where mistakes make it through the net. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is minimize those mistakes as much as possible. So if you are bringing someone in, you want to have that warm, fuzzy feeling that you can trust them to not break anything. That's a really key thing. So don't in your interview say, "Oh, well, the software I've written is," and just sort of laugh about it and say, "Oh, my software is crap." That's not a good thing to do.
I mean, on the basis, or this sounds like pretty clear things you'd expect people to know not to do. But the fact that it's actually happened in interviews, maybe we do need to address it.
Yeah, I think yeah, surprisingly common is what I would say. I think this profession as well, maybe. I mean, if you've done a PhD, you've been at university for 7 or 8 years, probably.
Mm,
So there is probably. I mean, there's definitely, and had this issue for a while. I do think universities could do a lot more. Careers departments in university could do a lot more to prepare candidates for interviews, prepare people for interviews. So,
Sure.
reaching out to people in industry, reaching out to people working in certain areas and getting them into not necessarily practice interviews, but give talks and sort of explain how to go about these things.
Hmm.
Because I think quite often what happens is you get your degree and then you're sort of thrown in the deep end. It's
Yeah.
maybe not the worst thing in the world, but um, I don't know. There's a lot of those sort of those dodgy things do seem to crop up.
Sure. Is there anything else you feel like you'd like to impart to the audience around this experience of interviewing everyone for data science, or do you feel like you've given probably the best advice you can?
I've got a few. I made some notes beforehand. I've got a
Yeah,
few
sure. Go
points. I
for it.
think
Yeah.
I think one thing is be honest, but not too honest.
That's a
So
good
I
one. That's a
I
good one.
really like honesty. I
Mm.
find it very, very entertaining whenever someone comes in. So again, I've interviewed someone and they were leaving they were working in a startup and they were leaving after quite a short amount of time. And I asked, why are you leaving? And he was like, the phrase "rats fleeing a sinking ship" comes to mind. And I cracked up because I thought that was quite funny and quite honest. Um, and I got a lot of respect for this person for saying that.
Yeah.
However, I think things like that would probably go down differently or worse with other interviewers because
Yes.
again, like let's think about it. You're going to work in a maybe you're going to work in a startup after to use this person as an example. They're leaving a job after a few months and they're saying that they're fleeing a sinking ship. You could then be the company that you're interviewing for could be a startup and you could be interviewing with one of the founders of that startup. They are not going to hire you if you're telling them that the moment things get rough you're going to be out of there, because
Mm.
sometimes startups, particularly at the beginning, that is going to happen. There is going to be rough periods. um that's just the reality of it. So in that instance, I say if I had been a different person, if Geolect had been in a different position, that would have been an immediate red flag, and that person probably wouldn't have been made an offer. So I think that's a really key point to get across. Um, like as I say, I will find that stuff very funny because I like honesty, and it
Yeah.
is funny whenever people are honest. But to be really careful about what you do disclose, and particularly around that question of why are you leaving your previous role, because oftentimes there will be parallels drawn by the interviewer from you saying that the reasons that you're giving for why you're leaving that company with the new company. They'll think, well, actually, this scenario that they've described is something that happened to us a few months ago. Would that have prompted this person to leave? Would they leave really
Mm.
quickly? I think that you've got to be really careful about how you sell that move. Um, and then I guess the final point really would be around is again sort of a touchy one, particularly in this sort of space. But I think you have to be quite. I think you need to do your research beforehand and be realistic around the sort of salary and benefits that you ask for, because again, that's
Okay.
going to be a question that you're going to get asked. What are your salary expectations?
Sure. I
Um,
think I think from my point of view, and you could completely tell I'm wrong, but if someone's done a PhD and it's in data science, which seems to be an industry which has got quite a demand for people to want to do it, but equally a lot of people that want to get into it, I feel like the salary could be quite a lot more than the average salary in the UK. Am I right in thinking that, or is it not the
yeah, you
case?
yeah you do quite well.
Okay.
I think, but my point was more around when I said be realistic. I think yes, like salaries are going to be good. I think one of the dangers sometimes, this has never happened at Geolect, but I know other people who work in startups where this is the case, where you will go in and you'll ask for a salary that's much higher than the company's willing to pay, and maybe perhaps hoping that then you'll get into a bit of a negotiation and you'll end up somewhere in the middle. What can sometimes happen, and indeed has happened in these examples that I can think of, is the company says, well, if this is their expectation now, and we do come to some sort of agreement, we're still going to be below their expectations, and their ambition is going to take them elsewhere quite soon. So I think that's something to be a little bit wary of. Figure out what you can get away with, and don't push it too much, because I think companies may sometimes just look and say, well, actually, we're going to go elsewhere with somebody who's maybe their ambition will keep them here for 3, 4, 5 years,
Yeah,
as opposed
that's
to
a
you going
great
for
point
one,
because
2 years.
I think then maybe also you have the opportunity once you're in the door, you've set reasonable expectations and you're happy with the salary to start with, or the packages to start with. And then once you're working super hard and you're making an impact at the company, you then have a really good leg to stand on, say, look, I've done this in your, yearly catch ups, and then push for a bit more maybe than when you originally started. Is that right?
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Well, Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on the show again. I think this has been incredibly valuable for anybody that's thinking of getting into data science. So thank you again for your time.
Not a problem. It's been good fun.
Where can people find you and the company you work at as well?
So I'm on LinkedIn, just Adam Symington. I'm sure my name will be around. It's spelled as it is spelled in the same way. I'm on Twitter as well. My Twitter name is Python Maps. I post geospatial visualizations using Python, which is why it's called Python Maps. Geolect is on LinkedIn as well. Geolect is fine, just GEOC. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble for that. GEOLLECT.
Brilliant. Thanks again for your time, Adam.
Not a problem. Thank you.